I want to start this one with a confession. My sister Mare does not travel light. Mare travels like she's evacuating a country. So when I told her we were doing New Mexico for a week, Albuquerque and Santa Fe, the whole road trip, with one small carry-on each, she looked at me like I'd suggested we walk there. "One bag," she said, "for a week in the desert." "One bag," I said, "for a week in the desert." She's still not over it, neither am I, honestly. But here's how it went, what it cost, and the 3 separate occasions I thought we might not make it home. I'll tell you now, before we get into it, that New Mexico was not on my original list. I'd had my eye on somewhere with a beach, somewhere with an easy chair and a view of water. Meyer's the one who pushed for New Mexico, on the grounds that we'd both spent our whole lives near an ocean, and had never once seen a desert, and she wasn't wrong, though I did remind her that never seen a desert is not the same as should go to one in July. She won that argument, mostly by ignoring me until I booked the flights. I booked this trip on my Google Flights app, the way I book everything now, because I like watching the little price graph and feeling like I'm outsmarting the airline. I set a price alert about 6 weeks out, went about my business, and one Tuesday morning the app pinged me like it had good news to deliver. Round trip, the 2 of us, into Albuquerque and out of Santa Fe, so we didn't have to backtrack. $412 total, for both of us. I stared at that number for a full minute before I believed it. Mary's reaction when I told her was, "That seems too good," which is Mary's reaction to anything that isn't a disaster. I told her that's exactly why we check the price graph instead of just booking the first flight we see in a panic, which is what she does every single time, and which is why she once paid $900 to go to Cleveland. She has not let the Cleveland comment go. I don't expect she ever will. The 1-bag challenge, now the 1-bag challenge. I did not invent this to torture my sister, though I'll admit there was a moment of enjoyment. I did it because checked bags cost money, lost bags cost time, and a woman my age does not need to be dragging a suitcase the size of a small refrigerator through an airport in July. Here's what actually got us through a week in 2 different climates. Albuquerque is a dry desert heat. Santa Fe up in the mountains gets properly cold at night, with 1 small carry-on apiece. First, everything rolls, nothing folds. I don't care what anyone tells you about tissue paper or vacuum bags. Roll-in is the only method that's ever made sense to me, and it cuts your space by 1/3 at least. Second, I packed 5 days of clothes for a 7-day trip, because I intended to do a sink wash halfway through, which I did in the Albuquerque hotel bathroom, using a travel bottle of dish soap, which works better on fabric than actual travel detergent and costs about $1 for a bottle that'll last you 6 trips. Third, and this is the one Mayor fought me on hardest, 1 pair of shoes. Walking shoes, the kind that don't look like walking shoes. You do not need hiking boots for Santa Fe unless you're actually hiking, and we were not actually hiking. We were eating and looking at churches. Fourth, layers instead of separate outfits. A base layer, a cardigan, a light jacket, and you can build 6 different looks out of 4 items, which sounds like something out of a magazine, but is actually just common sense dressed up. Maya, for the record, packed her 1 bag with 3 pairs of shoes anyway, by wearing the bulkiest pair on the plane, and stuffing the other 2 into every gap she could find. I told her that was cheating. She told me survival isn't cheating. We have been having some version of this argument since we were children, and I don't expect it to resolve in New Mexico. One more hack, and this is the one that saves the most money, in my experience. I wore my heaviest outfit and my bulkiest shoes onto the plane. Same as Mare, not for the shoes, but because a jacket worn is a jacket that doesn't count against your bag weight. Every frequent flyer knows this trick, but nobody actually does it, because it means looking slightly overdressed. In an airport in July, I have made peace with looking slightly overdressed. Mare has not, and spent our entire layover complaining that she was sweating through a cardigan she didn't need to be wearing at all, except that the cardigan was the only way both our toiletry bags fit. We also went through security in under 10 minutes, both of us, because everything liquid was already sorted into a single clear pouch each. No digging, no repacking on the little folding table, while a queue of people behind you sighs audibly. Mare timed it. She was almost disappointed there was nothing to complain about. We landed in Albuquerque in the early afternoon, and the first thing that happened, before we'd even gotten our rental car keys, was a hot air balloon drifted directly over the parking lot, low enough that we could hear the burner. Meyer, who had never seen one up close, let out a noise I can only describe as a sound effect. A man nearby, very calmly, said, "Yeah, that happens here," like it was a bus running late. I mention this because it set the tone for the whole trip. New Mexico does not explain itself to you. It just happens, and you're expected to keep up. On our second day, we rode the Sandia Peak tramway, which I'd read about but did not properly appreciate until we were in the little cabin, climbing straight up the side of a mountain with the whole desert flattening out beneath us. Mare, who does not love heights, spent the ride with her eyes shut and one hand gripping my arm hard enough to leave a mark, informing me the entire way that this had better be worth it. It was. At the top, the temperature had dropped a good 20 degrees from the desert floor, and neither of us had packed for it, which meant we stood at the overlook in our one spare cardigan each, shivering, taking photographs, and agreeing it was worth every bit of the shiver. We shared a room the entire week, which is not new for us. Mare and I have shared rooms on every trip we've taken since our own mother stopped coming with us. But I will say, New Mexico tested the arrangement more than most. Meyer snores at an altitude-adjusted volume, meaning the higher up we went, the louder she got, and by the time we reached Santa Fe at 7,000 feet, I was sleeping with a rolled-up cardigan over my ears. Our room in Albuquerque ran us $91 a night, a clean, no-fuss place near Old Town, booked well in advance for the discount. Santa Fe cost more, $118 a night, because Santa Fe knows exactly what it is and prices accordingly. Split 2 ways across the week, our lodging came to roughly $730 total, which is still less than some people pay for one night at a resort with a swim-up bar. The food in Albuquerque is where I properly understood green chile as a philosophy rather than a topping. It goes on eggs. It goes on burgers. A woman at a diner counter looked genuinely concerned for my well-being when I asked for it on the side, instead of smothered over everything, which is apparently the correct term, smothered, and not a suggestion. Mary, brave woman, ordered hers Christmas style, that's both red and green chile for anyone who hasn't had the pleasure, and spent the next 20 minutes drinking water like she was training for something. I ate mine slowly and lived to tell the tale. We spent about $14 a day each on food in Albuquerque, mostly because we're not big breakfast eaters and we split plates at dinner, which I recommend to anyone traveling with a sister, a spouse, or frankly anyone who won't stab you with a fork over it. The drive from Albuquerque to Santa Fe is only about an hour, which sounds simple until you remember that Mare was navigating, and Mare's relationship with a phone map is adversarial at best. We missed our turn once, ended up on a stretch of road with nothing but scrubland and one extremely confident roadrunner that stood in the middle of the lane and stared us down like it owned the deed to New Mexico. Mare wanted to get out and take its photograph. I pointed out that the bird had made its feelings about visitors quite clear, and we should perhaps just go around it, which we did, very slowly, while it watched us the entire time like it was memorizing our license plate. We took the long way to Santa Fe on purpose, along the Turquoise Trail, which winds through a string of old mining towns that have mostly turned themselves into galleries and roadside stands. It was beautiful, and it was also where our rental car's low tire pressure light came on, in a stretch of road with exactly one gas station in either direction, and no cell signal to speak of. Mary's suggestion was to keep driving and hope. My suggestion was to find the gas station, which we did, where a very patient older gentleman topped up all 4 tires for free and told us, without being asked, that the light comes on for half the tourists who take that road because of the elevation change. We tipped him anyway. Some things are worth more than the fix itself. Santa Fe itself is a different animal entirely. Adobe everywhere, artwork everywhere, and an altitude that had both of us out of breath. Climbing a staircase we would have taken at a jog back home. We spent a full afternoon at the plaza, wandered into more turquoise jewelry shops than I can count, and I will admit I bought one small pendant which was not in the budget, but which I do not regret in the slightest. We also stumbled into the farmer's market near the rail yard on our second morning in Santa Fe, purely by accident, looking for coffee, and ended up buying a small bag of blue corn peaky bread and a jar of local honey we did not need, and absolutely could not fit in a carry-on. That honey jar became its own small saga. Mare wrapped it in both our pairs of spare socks and carried it in her lap through security on the way home, rather than risk it breaking, which meant she went through the whole flight, holding a jar of honey like it was a small pet. Dinner in Santa Fe cost more than Albuquerque, closer to $22 a day each, but we made up for it by skipping the tourist strip entirely on our last night and finding a little place 4 blocks off the plaza that a hotel desk clerk recommended, where the enchiladas were better and the bill was smaller. That's a rule I'd give anyone. The best meal in any town is never on the street with all the restaurants advertising themselves. It's 4 blocks over, where the locals actually eat. The mishap. Now the mishap I promised you. On our second to last day, Mare lost the room key card somewhere between the plaza and the hotel, which would not normally be a crisis, except she'd also somehow lost her identification along with it, tucked into the same little zip pocket. We spent a genuinely tense hour retracing our entire afternoon, in and out of shops, me increasingly convinced we'd be spending our last night in New Mexico, filing a police report before we found the lot, zip pocket and all, sitting on a bench outside a church, exactly where she'd set her bag down to take a photograph of the door. Mare's takeaway from this was that New Mexico is an honest place and nobody had touched it. My takeaway was that we are getting her a bag with a zipper that actually closes, and I have already ordered it. The final tally. So here's where we landed, all together, for a full week. 2 women, 1 bag each. Flights, $412 total. Lodging, $730. Food for both of us across the week, roughly $250. A rental car for 6 days, $210. And my one small turquoise indulgence, $45, which I am counting separately because I do not want it blamed on the budget. All in, we came home for right around $1,650 for both of us, for a full week in a part of the country neither of us had ever seen. Split down the middle, that's well under $1,000 a person for airfare, hotels, a rental car, and more green chili than either of us had any business eating. And we did it all with 1 bag each. Mare has informed me she's never doing the 1 bag challenge again. Mare has also informed me 3 separate times since we've been home of things she's grateful she didn't have to check at the airport. I'm choosing to take that as a win. Here's what I keep coming back to, though. It was never really about the bag. The bag was just the excuse to prove to myself that I didn't need as much as I thought I did. Not the 4th pair of shoes, not the just-in-case outfit, not the extra everything I used to pack out of some vague fear that I'd be caught without. A week in the desert with 1 small carry-on taught me the same thing my whole retirement has been teaching me lately, which is that most of what we drag around, in suitcases and otherwise, we never actually needed in the first place. Mare would tell you the real lesson is that her sister is impossible to travel with and picks fights with birds. Both things can be true. Until the next one, pack light, book smart, and if a road runner is standing in your lane, just let the bird have the road.